whether I can have plus infinity be the 0 element and have it be less than the 1 element. Was there a requirement that 0 actually be less than 1 was sort of in this definition. And so I think it's kind of like when I talk to mathematicians, like, it's kind of what you want, then you make it that. So this just shows the full space of things that are possible. If we go back to our concatenation operators here, so these were our 4 concatenation operators, and our functions, our collision functions, and this shows you what that set looks like. So these are the 4x4 pairs here. All operators, they all distribute, and 16 of these form semi-rings because you're able to construct these various zeros. And this isn't like rigorous, I mean, someone could, I might have messed one up or a few up here or there or something like that. But this just kind of gives you a sense of the space that we're working on. Probably. So let's get into, now we're going to kind of really move it forward here. So we get into vector spaces. So we can have associated array vector addition. Again, all associated arrays are conformants. We have the concept of scalar multiplication, which is essentially applied to all values. So one of the things I really struggle with, so scalar multiplication kind of makes sense, right? If I have an associated array and I multiply it by a scalar, I can imagine just applying that to the, in an intersection sense, only to the key, the keys that are defined by 1. Scalar addition, though, is very difficult. The scalar addition only apply to, if I have a scalar plus an associated array, does it only apply to the keys? Or is a scalar really the associative array that's defined everywhere over all things, so it's infinite? So that's something I struggle with. So when you ask why is scalar addition not supported in D4M, it's because I don't know what it's supposed to mean, and you can easily just pop out the values, add whatever you want, stuff them back in, and be on your way, and then you're safe. So the vector space that we form, it meets the plus requirements. It commutes. It's associative. We have an identity, but we have no inverse, so we have to be careful. That's why we don't have that. And the vector space, it meets the scalar requirements. So all associative array operator pairs that yield felds also result in vector spaces without inverse versus maybe we call these vector semi-spaces, I don't know, or vector spaces over a feld or something like that. What kind of properties here? Well, we have scale identities. That's great. You can create subspaces. That makes sense too. The concept of a span. Yes, you can definitely do concepts of spans. Does span equal a subspace? So this is a big question in vector space theory. Your spans have, and subspaces. Is there? Not sure. Linear dependence is is there a non-trivial linear combination of vectors equal to the plus identity? You really can't do this without an additive inverse, and so that becomes a little bit. So we really kind of need to redefine linear independence, which we can do. But there's a lot of the proofs of linear independence and dependence that rely on the existence of inverses, and you probably could, circle your way around that.
Question: Are you just missing the additive inverse, or both the additive and the multiple?
Both. Yeah. So one of the things is consider a linear combination of 2 associative array vectors. Under what conditions do they create a unique result? So this really depends on what you choose. So for instance, if we have a vector, a1 and a2, when we multiply it by coefficients a1 and a2, and we use these as our plus and our multiply, and this is our 0 and 1, where are a1 uniquely determined? And so for instance, if I pick, in this case, our canonical identity vectors, which is a1 is equal to infinity and minus infinity here, then we find that we can, cover the space very nicely. If we do it the other, we can't. A better way to view that is in the drawing here. So here's my whole space of coefficients, a1 and a2, and we see that a1 and a2 uniquely define a result with these basis vectors, and a1 and a2 are completely degenerate with these basis vectors. So depending on the kinds of basis vectors you have, you can create unique stuff or not unique stuff. You give yourselves actual values here, basically if A1 is just equal to this value and A2 is equal to this value, this shows you what that looks like. There's places where it's unique, there's places where they're the same, and there's places where one of them is unique but the other is not unique. So again, there's a very rich possible, you can construct, using associative arrays basis vectors, a very rich set of things. And the same thing goes with multi-valued vectors. Again, different types of spaces here. We really need to kind of work this out. If anybody's interested, we're very interested in having people help us work this stuff out. Even going, which of these operations makes sense?
Because the vehicle of words is a very clumsy one. And when you try to talk about the processes of nature, what is complicated is not the processes of nature, but trying to put them into words. That's as complicated as trying to drink up the ocean with a fork. It takes forever. So this intense complexity that we see in everything is created by our attempt to analyze it all. And so what we do is, you see, when we analyze, we use our eyes and ears as scalpels. And we dissect everything. And we have to put a label on every piece we chop off. And so we scalpelize and we get it right down to atoms. Getting finer and finer, and we suddenly thought, well, we've got to the end of it, because the word atom means what is not cuttable. Atomos. But then we found we could cut the atom. And lo and behold, big fleas had little fleas upon their backs to bite them. And it goes on forever. There is no end to the minuteness which you can unveil through physical investigation. For the simple reason that the investigation itself is what is chopping things into pieces. And the sharper you can sharpen your knife, the finer you can cut it. And the knife of the intellect is very sharp indeed. And the sophisticated instruments that we can now make, well, there's probably no limit to it. But in a way, all that is vain knowledge. In a way. Because you see, what it does is, it gives you the illusion that you've solved your problems. When you have controlled certain things and you have solved certain problems, practical problems, you say, fine, more of that, please. Let's go on solving problems. And then you do. You create a world of people, as we are today, far more comfortable than people who lived in the 19th century. Just remember the troubles of going to a dentist when you were children, or some of you when you were children, of medicine, of badly heated homes, of all sorts of things that we don't put up with anymore. But the problem is we keep running into this thing that all constant stimulations of consciousness become unconscious. And when we take it as a matter of course to have certain confidence, then we switch the level on which we worry. When you solve a whole set of problems, people find new ones to worry about. And after a while, you begin to get that haven't we been here before feeling. Aren't we just going round on a cycle and doing the same old thing over and over and over again because we don't realize that we're chasing our own tails? By an eternally recurrent process of not knowing who you are. That is the hide and seek. That is the nature of what the Hindus call the Manvantara and the Pralaya, the period of the Manvantara in which the worlds are manifested, and the period of the Pralaya in which the worlds are withdrawn from manifestation. In and out, in and out. Evermore came out by the same door as in I went. And the thing is to get to the point where you can see that you are doing that in every moment of your existence, with every tiny little atom of your body. You now, at this minute, you see, are the whole system of inning and outing. In other words, you often think perhaps, maybe a long, long time ahead, I shall reach the point where I wake up from manifestation and overcome the world illusion and discover that I am the supreme reality behind all this diversification. My friends, there is no diversification. In other words, what you call diversification is your game. In the same way as you chop the thing and then you say it is made of pieces. Because you forget that you cut it. And so when you see the world as complicated and that there are life problems and that you might one day succeed. See, hundreds and hundreds of people are running like mad after something that they call that is success, and they have no idea what it is. So in exactly the same way, the Guru is keeping you running and running after spiritual attainment. You don't know what you want. This is where Krishnamurti is so clever. Because he says, if you ask me for enlightenment, how can you ask me for enlightenment? If you don't know what it is, how do you know you want it? Is that any concept you have of it will be simply a way of trying to perpetuate the situation you're already in. If you think you know what you're going out for, all you're doing is you're seeking the past, what you already know, what you've already experienced. Therefore, that's not it, is it? Because you say you're looking for something quite new. But what do you mean new? What's your conception of something new? Well, you figure I can only think about it in terms of something old, something I once had. So he doesn't say anything. He doesn't indicate anything positively. Everybody says, why are you so negative? Why don't you give us something to hang on to? Well, the simple answer is it would be spurious. You don't need anything to hang on to. You're it. You don't need a religion. But then you say, well, what is all this religious stuff about then? Why don't we just forget it? Try. By all means. Just go away. Don't go to gurus. Don't go to church. Don't enter philosophical discussions. Forget it. But then you'll realize that by having consented to forget it, you're still seeking. What a trap. What can you do? You see? If you stay here and listen to me or to anyone else who comes around here, you're fooling yourself. But if you go away, you're fooling yourself too. Because you still think that's going to improve your situation. It won't. And therefore, when you discover that it doesn't, you think, well, maybe it was a mistake to go away, and you come back to the Guru. He looks at you and says, you are very undisciplined, very, very inferior student, and you need to apply yourself. Well, as I explained what he's doing. But it comes down in a way to a sort of contest with the Guru. You see? Will you call his bluff? You're afraid to. Because you might discover that if you do call his bluff, he's no better than you are.